Hi everyone, afternoon. Welcome to our math review or math marathon session. My name is Shereka Simmonds. I'll be one of the tutors for today, along with Omari Brown. So this session is going to take a different approach compared to what you would have been used to. So we're going to ask you guys to share any questions or topics that you have issues with. And then we'll take it from there by addressing those, trying to find a question that's similar to that problem that you have and try to work on that. So it's basically finding out what you have issues with, and then we'll answer question based on those topics. So right off the bat, I'm going to ask you guys, you can either drop the questions in the chat or you can tell us the topic. So circle theorem. All right. Circle theorem. All right, so we're going to use the 2023 paper as reference. So we're going to try to find a question on circle theorem, and then we'll work through that.
There is a circle question theorem. Let me find it. Good afternoon, guys, and as Shereka said, welcome to our session today. We are going to be your tutors, and we thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being here with us. All right, question 9.
All right, so you're going to take this one, Omari, and then we alternate, or?
Sure, no problem.
All right.
All right. All right, so first thing, whenever you get a question, always try to read it and pick out all the important details, right? So we're going to start by reading the question. So it says that L, M, N, and R are points on the circumference of a circle with center O. PQ is a tangent to the circle at R. Angle PRL is equal to 48 degrees, and angle RON is 156 degrees. Find the value of each of the following angles, giving reasons for each of your answers, and you have to show all working where appropriate, right? So PQ is a tangent. You know, that means that it's a line that touches only one point on a circle, right? And that point that it touches is R. It says angle PRL is equal to 48 degrees. Whenever they give you an angle in that format with 3 letters, then the angle is always at the middle letter. So if you look at your diagram and you follow PRL, right? If you follow P, R, and L, right? So P, R, L. So you're saying that the angle 48 degrees is right here. R, O, N, 150 degrees, 156 degrees is right here. And so that's just some of the thoughts that should be going through your mind as you read the question, right? So, right, it said find the value of each of the following angles, giving reason for each of your answers. Show all workings where appropriate. The first one is angle R. Does anyone have any idea how it is that we're going to go about finding angle R? You're free to open your mic and respond or give your answers in the chat. Right. So I'm not seeing any responses in the chat as yet, but what I'd suggest that the first thing we do, we start by looking at our angle, find out where angle R is, right? We look at the diagram, angle R is between R, L, and N, right? Now we also need to find out or consider what else is around angle R, right? Now I see where someone said in the chat that they think that angle R is 90 degrees, and that is a fair answer, but it's not correct. The reason that that answer is incorrect is because Rn is a chord and not the diameter. So if this was the diameter, then angle R would be 90 degrees, right? But that was a good try nonetheless, right? Now, so Rn is a chord, and there's also a second angle that we have on that chord or near that chord, angle NOR, right? Right. And so Adriana is correct, right? The angle at the center, which is 156 degrees, is always twice the angle that is subtended right here. So this angle right here at the center, NOR, is going to be 2 times the size of this angle, and they have to be on the same chord. So that chord right there is Rn, right? And so it's just simple division by 2. So if we divide 156 by 2, we're going to get 78 degrees. So I'll just write that right here for us to remember it, right? 78 degrees. Right, not to worry. I mean, angle E is the next part of the question, so not far off. That's where we're heading to next. Let me find it. Look. Right. So angle E. That's the next part of the question. So again, we have to think about where angle E is in our diagram. Now, angle E is near our tangent. In fact, it is formed between our tangent and our chord, which is NR, right? And so what we know from Shereka theorem is that the angle between the chord, NR, and the tangent, PQ, so that angle right here is E, is going to be equal to the angle subtended by the same chord, NR, but in the opposite or the alternating segment. The opposite segment is this segment right here, right? So this angle E is going to be equal to our angle R. And so E is also equal to 78 degrees. If you have any questions, just feel free to stop me if I'm not clear. I said you guys can put it in the chat, or you can open your mic box and just let me know. I don't mind either way. All right. Next, I'm going to try about the question. Right. Next one is angle A.
So me na hear nothing.
You're hearing? You're not hearing me? If you're not hearing, then leave the meeting and rejoin. Can someone just put that in the chat for her so that she knows to leave and rejoin? Hopefully the audio issues will sort itself out. Right. Now we're moving on to angle A. Right. So what I said was that the angle between the tangent and the chord is equal to the angle subtended by the same chord but in the alternating segment, right? So right here, right? This angle right here is in this segment of our circle, right? And so what the law tells us is that the angle is going to be equal to the angle in the opposite segment. So you're looking on this side, right? This is the opposite segment, just for clarity. So I hope that answered your question. Let's put back the 78 right there. And move back to the third part of the question, which asked us to determine angle A. Whenever it comes to circuit theory questions, you always have to look at the angle that they're giving you to find out, and then think about what part or what shape that angle is in, right? So in this case, when we are thinking about angle A, which is this angle right here at vertex M, it is inside of this quadrilateral here. So N, M, L, R, that cyclic quadrilateral right there. And so what it tells us is that angle A must be equal to the complement of angle R. So angle R, sorry, let me not say angle R, angle LRN plus angle LMN must be equal to 180 degrees. So angle LMN plus angle LRN must be equal to 180 degrees, right? And so if we want to find A, we first have to find this angle right here. We don't know what that angle is, but what we do know is that this entire angle right here, I'm going to draw this a bit big and it's a bit crooked. This entire angle right there is 180 degrees. This is the part right here. It's 48 degrees. This is the part right here is 70 8 degrees. And so we can figure out what this portion is, the part that we're interested in. We can figure that out by just doing simple subtraction. I'm reading a message in chat. Just give me a second. I actually have 54 degrees for that inside angle there that we're trying to find now, A. Right? So I have E as 78 and 54 degrees as angle LRN. I don't think that the teacher was wrong, probably just that you misinterpreted what they said. So I'll continue. So 180 degrees. Give me a second, I'm looking at it again. All right. I'm looking at this. Blah, blah, blah. So 160 degrees right there. 24 to 24, so it's going to be 12. Adriana, do you mind opening your mic and just explain why you said that they said E was 66 degrees for me?
Sure. So the angle at the center is 156 degrees, and that makes this triangle an isosceles triangle. And if you take
Which
away
triangle are you referring to? Which triangle are you referring to?
RON.
RON?
Yes. And if you take away 156 from 180, you get I think it's 48. And if you divide that by 2 evenly, you get 24 on both sides, which would be
Come on, you get 24 if you take that away from 180.
No, from 156 from 180, and then you divide that by 2. So
I'm getting 12 there.
hold on, let me check it again.
I mean, I could have made a mistake. I could have made a mistake. So I'm interested to hear so I can see what's happened.
Okay.
But so you're saying RON is an isosceles triangle because OR and ON are both radii. We have that angle at the center, 156 degrees there. While 180 degrees in that isosceles triangle. And so the angle ORN and angle ONR should be equal, right? Isosceles triangle angles at the base. So 180, and we subtract 156 from that, gives us 24, right?
Yes.
Where that make 160 and then 20, 180. So each of those angles should be 12 degrees.
That
right?
is true.
So I'm up to that part, the 12 degrees, right? So how would I move from the 12 degrees to get in 66 degrees for E?
Well, looking at it now, I realize my teacher made a mistake with the 24, but the principle is still the same. So if you see QRO, that is a 90-degree angle because of
QRO,
yes.
90 degree, yeah.
Yes. And if we know that the angle NRO ORN is 12, then we're going to subtract that from the 90 to get E.
Which is 78.
Let me check that for you again. Okay, so it's still the same answer. I guess my teacher got to did a miscalculation. I'll remind him.
Yeah, it sound, I think he said something about 44 there. I'm thinking maybe they subtracted 156 from 200 and not 180. It's probably just an oversight.
Or they perhaps forgot to divide 24 by 2 evenly. I'll remind him.
Yeah, but what he actually pointed out was actually was actually a very good example of an alternative approach that you could have used to find E. As you rightly said, Q, R, and O right there, that's a 90-degree angle because where the tangent meets a radii, right here is 90 degrees, right? So if we know that this entire thing right here is 90 degrees, and we were able to calculate that this angle right here, the isosceles triangle, this angle is 12, then the remaining portion, which is E, right? You can easily get the answer. So that's an alternative approach, and you would have gotten full marks for that, right? So that's actually a very good approach. And I know a lot of persons aren't very comfortable with circle theorem. And so if it is that you can understand it by using triangles and the 90-degree angle, then that is perfectly fine to you. The question did say that you're to state your answer. So if you have an alternative approach that results in the correct answer, you're still correct. Right. So we're clear on that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks. So I was back at explaining how we are going to calculate angle A, which is inside our cyclic quadrilateral. So M, N, R, L, so quadrilateral, right? And I was saying to you guys that angle L, M, and R plus angle L, R, and N should equal to 180 degrees. And so if we know what this angle right here is, I'm going to shade it in yellow if I can. If we know what this angle right here is, then we can figure out what A is, right? And I was saying to you guys that that angle lies on the tangent. And so there's a 180 degrees right there as well. So 180 degrees right here. We know the angles on both sides. So you know this is 48 degrees right here. This portion right here. And we know E is 78 degrees. And so just do some subtraction there. So 180 degrees is going to be equal to 48. My handwriting is a bit messy, so bear with me. Plus 78 plus or angle LRN. Right? And that gives us 54 degrees for LRN. And 180 degrees less LRN is going to be angle E minus 54 going to be angle E. And therefore we get 126. Let's see if there's any other part to the question. That's it. All right. Shereka, you want to tackle the bearings portion?
Sure. So
Just give me a second,
the
let me
next
clean this up
topic
for you.
you guys mentioned would have been bearing. I think it's after this question.
Yeah.
All right. So bearing, it's not a complex topic once you understand the basic concept, guys. So with every bearing question, there are basically 3 formulas that can be used to achieve your response. There's usually a question where you have to apply the cosine rule. There is usually a question where you have to maybe apply either the tan rule, the sine rule, or the cos rule. And I'm hoping that you guys are familiar with those trigonometric terms. And there's also usually a question where you basically just ask a general question, and it's usually linked to somewhat circle theorem or basic knowledge that you should know about diagrams. So for this question, we're going to tackle it by looking to see which one of the formulas that we'll need for each, and then we'll solve based on that. So the question says the diagram below shows a triangular field LMP on horizontal ground. So LMP, so we know that those are the 3 points of the triangle. So anything else outside of that wouldn't most likely be what we're going to introduce. So let me see if I can. What I usually do once I'm going to do questions like these, I usually draw a north point for every single point on the diagram. So we know that L already has a north point. So we're going to introduce one for M. And we'll do the same for P. And this will come in handy further down when you realize certain parts of the question ask you base relative to a certain point, they're asking you to calculate something. So the first question says that calculate the value of angle MLP. So we're going to follow the track that it's telling us, which is M, which is here, L to here, and P to here. So we need to find this angle. Another easy way to determine which angle they're referring to, you just look for the middle letter, which is L, and you know that that's where you would like to find. So for this diagram, we're given all 3 sides, and we're given no angle. So based on that information, which rule or trigonometric theory would you apply for this question? Anybody can go ahead and open their mic. Pythagoras, no, because this is not a right angle triangle. Cosine rule, yes. you would use the cosine rule, and the reason is because it's not a right angle triangle. So for persons who don't know, the cosine rule is basically a simple mathematical theory that you can use to either solve for an angle when given two sides or all three sides, or you can use it to find a particular side of a triangle that is not right angle when you're given two sides and an angle. So in this case, we're given all three sides and we are going to use it to find a particular angle. So the formula for the cosine rule, let me see who knows the formula. I'm going to write something and you guys can confirm if it's correct or not. That is supposed to be a B. It's 2AB. All right, so based on what you're seeing so far, is this formula correct, guys? That's one thing to note as well, guys. You cannot go into your math exam and not know your formulas. You can't go in there not knowing your theories, because in most cases, for example, when Omar was just explaining, some of them might ask you to justify your answer. So you need to know your formula. Some of them are usually given at the front of your exam paper, but not all. So please ensure that you know the formulas in advance. So whether they're given to you or not, you still have an idea of what you should be using for each question. So let me know, guys, if this formula is correct or it's not. And I'm seeing the chat, so you can drop it in the chat if you don't want to open your microphones. It's just a yes or no, guys. Nothing too complex. All right, so I'm not seeing any response at all. So one person says yes, one says not sure. All right, so how do we identify that one side is C? We haven't done that as yet. We haven't identified which side we're going to label as C or anything. We're just putting down the formula on the paper so we know what to use for now. So Adriana, we haven't identified where we're going to label as C or A or B as yet, but we'll get there. So the formula is actually incorrect, guys. This is the correct formula. So please note, pay keen attention. Things like that can cause you to get a question completely wrong. Always, always, always ensure that you have the correct formula noted, because sometimes it might be that you wrote the formula incorrectly, and because you're paying attention to what you would have written in the previous line of working out, you continue to make the same mistake. So pay attention to your formulas. So going back to Adriana's question, where she would have asked us, how will we know what's going to be labeled as C, A, or B? So C is usually the longest side of the triangle. So that's something that's given. C is usually the longest side of the triangle, and in this case, our C is going to be 180. C is also opposite to the angle that you're trying to find. So again, C is usually the longest side of the triangle, and it's usually opposite to the angle that you're trying to find. In this case, our C is 180. In this case, it's 180. So we have 180 squared is equal to, any side can be your A, any side can be your B. For me, I'm going to let my A be the 150. So 150 squared plus 120. Oh my word. It's 120. Forgive the crappy writing, guys. This is supposed to be a 2 squared minus 2 times 150. Go ahead if you have a question. Two 150. The formula varies, guys. So sometimes you might see where they switch it around to say A squared is equal to B squared plus C squared minus 2AC cos A. It depends on how you word it. So it's not incorrect to put the letters different places, but ensure that they coincide. So if you have a C as the value on the left, you should also ensure that C is what is beside your cos. If it is that you have A over here, ensure that it's A that you have beside the cos. And then this is cos C. All right, so once you've went further to break this down, let me see, 180 times 180 would be what, like 32,000 maybe, around that. All right, so further down in the calculation, guys, we'll reach the point where you're able to find the values for each. Transpose, so you'd find the value for 180 squared. That is 32,400. You'd find the value for 150 squared. That would be 22,500. And you'd find the value for 120 squared, and that would be 14,400. You do the same for this section, so it would be 2 times 150 times 120, and the cos C would remain the same. So we're basically just breaking it down so we can find what C is, because remember, we're trying to find an angle. So you'd reach a point where you'd find the total value for this section. You'd bring it over to this side and subtract it from the, let me show you. So the 180 squared minus whatever the total of this will be, we're going to call it x for now, just for space purposes. X squared equal negative, this is very important, guys. Remember, this is a negative sign. So even though we would have removed this portion before it, the negative sign still remains. So it would be minus whatever this value is, and I think it's 3,000 or 36,000 cos C. So the value on this side, once you've simplified this, it will be where your
It's going to
answer
give you
should,
4,500.
yes. So it would be negative 4,500. And the reason it's negative, because I think this portion, Omar, the x squared will be greater than the value that's on this side, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, so we have negative 4,500. And that would be equal to negative 36,000 cos C. So what we need to do now is get rid of the 36,000 because remember the end goal is to find what C is. So we need to get rid of the 36,000 and we need to get rid of the cost. So getting rid of the 36,000 first, you would need to divide both sides by that value. So you divide negative 4,500 by negative 36,000. I think you should end up with 0.1 something, maybe about, let me see, 0.25. So we end up with 0.125 is equal to cos C. Because remember, it's no longer negative because we would have divided by this negative value. And you know, negative divided by negative would give you a positive. Hence why there is no negative sign beside this value here. So it's a positive value that we're working with now. And you know, if we have cos on one side and we want to find the value beside cos, we need to cos inverse. So we find the cos inverse cos inverse of 0.125 should give us our value C. And I think once you've put that into your calculator, you should get a value of 82.5 degrees. Any questions, guys? I know that was a pretty much a mouthful, so let me know if there's a particular line that you don't understand and you want me to go over. How did I arrive here? So please go ahead, open your mic, drop it in the chat. Your final answer, 82.5 degrees. Don't forget your units. That's also something important while doing your exams. Don't ever forget your units. That's if they're given. In this case, we know angles are usually measured in degrees, so we ensure that we have our degree. No questions? Everybody understands how we arrived at the 82.5? You got 82.8, Adriana?
Yes, miss.
All right, so if you round it off, it would be about 83 to be exact. So it would be correct in both instances, but let me check that. Yes, so it's 82.8. Thank you for that, Adriana. So anybody else has anything that they would like to add? So just to run through the question again, first you need to identify what you have and what the question is asking you for. So as we would have stated, this is not a right angle triangle. It's not a right angle triangle, so we definitely know we can use Pythagoras theorem. We can just use the basic tan, cos, and the others. After we've identified that, then we say, all right, we need to use the cosine rule, but what is the cosine rule? Ensure that you have the correct formula. As I said, the formulas are usually given, some of them are usually given on your exam paper. If it is that you maybe doubt that maybe you have a minus in the incorrect area or a plus in the incorrect area, double check. If it's not given on the exam, try your best to remember what it is. Write down your formula. Always, always write down your formula. It helps you to better track your work, you know, to ensure that you're doing the right thing. So once you've gotten the right formula, you move on just by plugging in the values. Big question is, how do you know which value to put where? If you're looking for an angle, the angle is always opposite to the longest side, and that longest side is usually on the left side of the equation. In our case, we're looking for L, and the longest side is opposite to L. Hence the reason why 180 is our C. Again, remember cosine rule can be used for two things. If you want to find an angle and you have all three sides, or you have two sides and an angle and you want to find the third side. So remember those two scenarios, because this minute they might have you explain one scenario, and the next minute they might give you a different scenario. So you know your formula, you know your reason, you plug in your values, and you ensure that you keep your signs, guys. Often persons make the mistake of just dropping off a negative sign here or there, and they end up getting the answer incorrect. Please keep your signs. Remember, once a value crosses the equal sign, if it's via add or subtraction, then the sign changes. For example, we had this section here where it was 150 squared plus 120 squared. When we find that value and try to cross over, it will become minus. In the case where you're dividing, you take the sign with you. So you're dividing both sides in this question by 36, negative 36,000, not just 36,000. And as I said, you just plug in your values, do your calculation, you should get your answer. All right. All right, so you can scroll Omari and let's answer the second part of this question. Let me erase. It's not erasing. All right, so the second part of the question asks us to find the bearing of M from L. So they add a little note to say the bearing of P from L is 210. So let me do a little drawing here. Just a little mock-up diagram for you to be able to track what the other diagram would have looked like. It won't be perfect, bear with me. All right, and this was our L, this was our M, and our P. So they said bearing of P from L, so we draw from L, keyword guys, from L, so we're starting at L. Any letter that comes after from, that is your starting point. Any letter that comes after from, that's usually your starting point. So they told us it's from L, which is up here. So they are giving us all of this section. All of that section is what we're being told is 210. The question asks us to find M from L. So again, we're starting at L, but we're not going all the way to P. We're stopping right here at Mr. M. So if we're being told that this entire section is 210, and we just calculated this little part here, we already know the answer to this question. It would be 210 minus the 82.8 that we got before. All right. So it's 210 minus the 82.8 that we got before. And that should give you, I think, maybe 127.2. So again, if you had gotten the first section incorrect, you would most likely get this part incorrect as well. And that's the thing with math. Usually these questions line up with each other. So if you make an error in the first part, that error usually spills over to the other questions. So that one was pretty simple. So I don't think much explanation would be needed. The next part says calculate the value of angle NLP and hence finding the bearing of L from P. So it might be a little tricky when they say NLP, because you may be saying, where is the N? Because we're working with the 3 points that we were given initially. So they rephrase it to say the bearing of L from P. So remember, once the letter comes after from, that's going to be a starting point. So we're going to put a little N here. And they want us to find L from P. So this little distance here. But that part shouldn't be too bad either, because remember, we would have done a lot of calculations up here. So it shouldn't be too hard to find this corresponding angle here. So I'm going to redraw a little sketch. So first we need to find, let me change the color if I can or not. I don't think I can change the color. So they're asking us to find firstly this angle here. Once you find that angle, you'll be able to find the other angle that they're actually asking you for. But we already know angles in a circle equal what? 360. They already told us that this entire section, let me do some erasing so you can see a little bit better. I'm going to redraw that. Right, so here is our N. I'm using the pen. Yeah, I'm using the pen Omari, but it's just not giving me the option to change the color. All right, so they gave us this entire angle here to be 210. We know that angles in a circle is equal to 360. So we can easily find this little section here. So we can easily find that section. So 360 minus 210, you should end up with about 150. So our angle here is 150. And there's also a rule that says corresponding angles, especially in a diagram like this. This is not really a perfect representative, but yes, these angles are usually equal to 180. So we use the calculations from before or the value given in the previous question to say, all right, 360 minus 210, we know that this angle here is 150. These angles at the base should be able to add up to 180. So it would be 180. I would write better. So it would be 180 minus that 150 and it should sum to 30. So you can get this question correct even though you would have maybe made an error in the previous two. So again, guys, pay attention to what you're being asked. And remember, don't forget your units. So this is 2023 past paper. So again, guys, bearings is not difficult. It's usually, as I said, a repetitive question in the sense where it's basically the same thing that they continue to ask you for. And I would have explained before, they usually ask you to either find a side or angle. In finding that side or angle, sometimes you have to use maybe tan or the sine rule, sorry, or the cosine rule. Ensure that you know those two formulas at the back of your hand. Once you've gotten that question, the follow-up questions are usually linked to that previous question. So you'll answer your questions based on what is asked. Don't answer based on what you think they're asking. Please, Omar would have mentioned it. Pay keen attention to key terms in these questions and answer what is asked. So the other topic that you guys would have mentioned outside of bearing would have been geometry and linear programming. So let us see if we can find one of those questions, Omari. What's the answer for 11A? This is question 11? Oh,
I
we
meant
haven't.
I.
Oh, scroll down. Let me see which question was that. Oh, let me erase these. Oh, that would be 127.2. Erase these. So the second part of the question is 127.2. And B is 30, yeah. All right, so we're going to see if we can try to find another question that is linked to the other topics that you guys have an issue with.
All right, so just to look at the formulas that come on the paper. So these are what was on, these formulas were what were presented to the students last year. No, there is no rule that says that CXC must give you the same formulas every year. They can change it. They might choose to remove something. So as Shereka said, it's best if you guys try to memorize the formulas. But if it is that you place the formula on the paper and you think there might be something wrong with it, just double check to see if they would have given you that formula on the formula sheet.
So there's the sine and the cosine rules, guys.
Linear programming. Where is it?
I don't think they had any on this paper. Let me just do a quick
Unless they
check
want to
with
like
you.
this.
I think we can do the graph question. Let me tell you which page it's on. Stop moving that fast. There's a graph question there.
You're referring to this one, question C, 3C, I think.
We see. Let me see. No, not that one. There's another one that talks about X, Y. Yeah, God.
This one?
No, that's matrix. I think it's on page, what's this? 22. So it's a part of question. Let me tell you the number. It's a part of question 8.
Wow, found it.
Question 8, yeah. All right, so basic understanding of lines, guys. Always ensure that you know the formula for a straight line, know how to find the gradient, know how to find the y-intercept if needed, know certain principles like perpendicular lines. What is it that makes line perpendicular? What is it that makes a line parallel? Those concepts are key to remember. So for perpendicular lines, it would be where the gradients are inverses of each other. And for the parallel, they're usually the same. The gradients are usually the same. So we're going to see if we can go through this question. If it's not related to a particular question that you had an issue with, as we said before, you can always just open your mic and interject, and we'll try to address any issue that you guys have. So we're going to complete the table using the formula that's given there. So y is equal to x cubed plus x plus 7. So this is not a regular line. Obviously, this is a parabola or maybe some other curve. Somebody would like to speak, or Errol? All right, so we're going to find what our y is, and it's pretty simple. We're just going to plug the values that we're seeing into our formula, or x values into our formula, and then work from there. So in this case, y or x is -3, so -3 -3. And please note, guys, there's a negative sign in front of the x, so we can't leave that off. Put back the negative sign, squared, and then we add another -3, so plus, put in bracket again your -3, and then plus 7. Oh my God, this looks so terrible. Plus -3 plus 7. So I'm just doing this first one just to give you guys an understanding of the fact that you have to include all your signs, and when working with negative numbers, it can be tricky. So -3 squared, 3 threes is 9. Negative times a negative gives you a positive. But remember, we had a negative sign at the front before, so this will give us -9. -9. And then we'll have -3 here. So this will become -3. And then plus 7. Two negatives beside each other, we'll add them. So 9 and 3 is 12. We'll end up with -12 plus 7. And you add that, you should get -5. So our answer for this part here is -5. And you would repeat that process to find the other values. So in this case, we would get -1, -1, minus 1, that would give us -2. -2 plus 7, that sounds like +5. So this is a +5. So 1 squared, -1 plus 1, that's 0. This is a 7. 3, 9, -9 plus 3, that gives us -6, -6 plus 7, that gives us a +1. All right, any questions, guys, based on the working out to find the y values? Pretty straightforward. All right, good. So that's basically it to find your x or y values, depending on what you're asked to find. All right, you can scroll down a bit, Omari. All right, so you're asked to construct the graph. So basically that's just plotting the points and then connecting the dots. And they did state for x is less than or equal to -3, but not greater than or equal to 4. So that's basically those restrictions that you're seeing here. So if there's an x value given for a number over or below any of these, you don't need to include them. That's basically what this section is telling you, because the graph isn't extended that far to accommodate those points. And then they'll ask you for the maximum and the minimum points. Those are pretty straightforward. You know, the maximum would be the highest point if it's turned like this. If it's a case where the curve is bent like this, then you would have a maximum point. If
Hold
it's
a
a
second,
case where
Shereka. Give me a second. I've already, all right. Hey,
Oh, you did do
there.
this question already. Nice. Let me erase this.
So those would have been the points that you would have plotted on your graph, and then your curve should look something like that.
So in this case, we would have a maximum then. And the maximum point, yes, will be that point at the top there. Oh my God. What was the next part of the question, Omari?
Next part.
So write down the equation of the axis of symmetry for the graph. So the axis of symmetry is usually just to say x is equal to a particular value, and that line usually cuts the graph in two. So for example, on the diagram that you just saw, it's usually the x value from the maximum that we use. So the maximum, remember, it's the highest possible point, and it's usually a midsection between the highest range and the lowest range. So as I said, we usually use the x value from the maximum to say x is equal to that particular value. And that's usually a line of symmetry. There are other terms. Sometimes I don't know if they do that for CSEC, but if they ask you to draw a line that's perpendicular to a certain point on the graph, or that would be perpendicular to the maximum, then you know it would have to form a right angle. So it would be a horizontal line instead. So understanding the terms are pretty important. So symmetry, just remember that cuts the graph in perfectly two halves, or two perfect halves. All right, next part. So using the graph, find the solution of the equation negative. So we know what the question is basically asking us. When y is equal to 0, what is x equal to? So going back to the graph, we're going to try and locate when x is equal to 0 or y is equal to 0, what is x equal to? And there are two values at that point. So that's point A, point B. So based on, this is pretty much a very specific graph, but your answer should be around -2 and 0 and 3 and 0. So the x value is -2, the other x value would be about 3. So as we're showing, this is a pretty precise measure, so it might not be -2.193, but it should be something close to that. As this is much more precise versus just you using your rulers to draw. All right, next part. Adrian, I saw that you mentioned that there is a linear programming question on 2022. If you can send a screenshot of it in the chat, that would be great.
It's in this document, so when we finish, we can scroll down.
We can scroll down. All right, no
Yeah.
problem. All right, so they want us to draw a line through the points -3 and 1 and 0 and 8, and then they want you to determine the equation of this line. So, you know, in drawing that line, they're basically asking you to find what are the y-intercepts, what are the, not r, what is the gradient? So you can do that manually, or you can draw the graph and then decipher it from the graph. In most cases, persons still have to do it manually in order to find the graph itself. So what's the gradient for this one, Omari? I hope you guys know the formula to find gradient.
Gradient was 3.
The gradient was 3 and the y-intercept
Was 8.
8. So 3 and 8. Let me make a note so you guys can see. So m is equal to 3. That's so terrible, man. M is equal to 3. And our C is equal to 8. So just for reference sake, I'm going to let you guys know that the formula for gradient is rise over run, or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So make a note of that, guys. As we said before, not all formulas are given. So please ensure that you know these formulas before the exam. You can always create a formula sheet and walk with it. Every chance you get, you maybe study 1, study 2 in between what you have going on throughout your day. So gradient formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and you can use these same values to obtain that information. Once you found the gradient, you can just plug one of these coordinates into the equation y equal mx plus c to find the y-intercept of c. All right, so we're going to scroll down to the 2022 paper. Let me tell you, she said it's question 8C for 2022. All right, so you have to do the entire question to do that part. So a rental company has X cars and Y minivans. The company has at least 8 vehicles altogether. The number of minivans is less than or equal to the number of cars. The number of cars is more than 9. So they want us to write down all 3 inequalities for that scenario. All right,
I
you want
think I
to
can.
attack question A?
Yeah, I'll do it.
All right.
Right. So it says a rental, well, so the question says write down 3 inequalities in terms of X and or Y other than X greater than or equal to 0 and Y greater than or equal to 0 to represent this information, right? So it should be obvious to you why it is that they say that they don't want it to use X greater than or equal to 0. And that's because you can't have 0 cars or 0 minivans in the context of this question. So they're letting you know that they have at least 1 of each vehicle. So none of the vehicles or none of the quantities is 0 in that case, right? So it says write down 3 inequalities in terms of X and or Y other than those to represent this information. The first part says a rental company has X cars and Y minivans. The company has at least 8 vehicles all together, right? So 8 vehicles, either minivans or cars. So it's going to be X plus Y would be greater than or equal to 8, right? Next part says the number of minivans is less than or equal to the number of cars. So Y was minivans, and they're saying that it is less than or equal to the number of cars. So our second one is going to be Y is less than or equal to X. And then the third one says the number of cars is no more than 9. So we know that our third one is X must be less than or equal to 9, right? So that would have been our 3 equations. X plus Y is greater than or equal to 8. So that tells us that there are at least 8 vehicles in total, right? That's in agreement with what the statement says. Next one says that Y is less than or equal to X, so that we know that there are at maximum, right, the same number of minivans as there are cars, right? So minivans must be less than or equal to the number of cars. And finally, the number of cars is no more than 9. Part B says a car can carry 4 people and a minivan can carry 6 people, right? So there are at most 60 persons to be taken on a tour, and they want us to show that 2x plus 3y should be less than or equal to 60. Right? And that's pretty simple for us to do. So the company is going to use their fleet of vehicles to carry the persons out, and we're pretty much going to assume that the full X vehicles go and the full Y vehicles go and bring the people to their destination, right? And so 4 persons can fit in a car, that's 4, and the number of cars is X, right? Plus 6 persons can fit in a minivan, and the number of minivans is Y, and that must be less than or equal to 60. Now, when we look at this equation, right, we recognize that the numbers right here, they're all even numbers. We have 4, we have 6, and we have 60, right? And so what we can do is that we can divide by 2. So 4x divided by 2 is going to give us 2x plus 6x divided by 2 is going to give us, scroll down a bit for you guys. Six y divided by 2, that's going to give us 3y, and 60 divided by 2 is going to give us 30. And that was what they asked us to show. Now, something that we didn't tell you guys before is that usually when you look at the number of marks that CXC has ascribed to a certain question, you can generally identify how much work it is that they want you to do. If it's a 1-mark question, it isn't anything too difficult. If it's 3 marks, then there are going to be more steps involved in that process, right? Next question says, see on the grid below, plot the 4 lines associated with the inequalities in A and B, shade and label the regions that satisfy all 4 inequalities. So we start off with our first inequality, which is x plus y must be greater than 8. Now, I must admit I'm not as skilled with manipulating Desmos with inequalities as regular linear equations, but I'll try to see how best.
You can just treat the greater than signs or less than signs as equal signs, Omari, and enter it that way.
Mhm. Let's clear this. Sorry, wrong way. X plus y should be greater than or equal to 8, right? That's the first one. The second one was y should be less than or equal to x. Essentially, what you're doing, as Shereka would have indicated, was that you were drawing the line x plus y is equal to 8. Just shift for a bit for you guys. All right. They said x plus y is equal to 8. X plus y greater than or equal to 8. Let us pretend for a moment that instead of the inequality, we have the equal sign. So let's write down x plus y is equal to 8. And you're going to rearrange that to give you y is equal to 8 minus x. And in order to plot the point, what you do, you just identify two easy values for you to plug into this function so that you can get 2 points, and you're going to connect them on the graph. So I'm going to choose, for example, let's say I'm going to let x equal to 0. When I plug 0 into y is equal to 8 minus x, I'm going to get y equal to 8. And for my second point, I'm going to choose x is equal to 8. And when you plug that into the equation, you get y is equal to 0. Right? Then, having identified that point, which x is 0, and x is 0, y is 8, as far as this, right here. I won't plot all of the points on this graph paper right here. I'm not showing you guys how you would go about plotting them on an actual paper, but the rest I'll plot in decimal. So when x is 0, y was 8, and when x was 8, y was 0. Then you'd connect these 2 points here, right? So that is our line y is equal to 8 minus x, right? Which is the same thing as x plus y would be equal to 8, right? But at this point, we have to remember that the question gave us an inequality, and it said that x plus y must be greater than or equal to 8. And so at this point, you would shade the region of your graph that is above that line. So you shade here, here, pretty much what you do. Then I'm going to go ahead and plot the other lines on this much just to speed things up for us. If you guys have any questions or are not clear with what I said, you can ask and I'll try to see how best I can backtrack and assist you guys.
And the first thing we want to do is to put these numbers in order. And especially since we're going.
All right. So we already did x plus y must be greater than x. X plus y must be greater than 8. The second equality that we got was y must be less than or equal to x. Again, pretty similar situation. We pretend that this is y is equal to x. Then we substitute in 2 values for x, 2 convenient values. For example, you could use 0 and 1. And then afterwards, just connect those points across your graph. And then you remember to add the inequality and shade the correct region. The third inequality was x was less than or equal to 9, right? And our fourth inequality was 2x plus 3y It's going to be less than or equal to 30. Now, I hope you guys can see what's going on here, right? So we have all of these lines on our graph, and we need to identify where they overlap properly. So let's start with the first line again, right there. So everything above that line and everything below this line. So we're looking for somewhere in this region that the two lines overlap. We add our third line. So it narrows down the space again for us just a little bit more. It's going to be in the regions where the three lines overlap. So it should be above this line right here. Should be below this one. Should also be below this one. And then finally, it should be below this line as well. And so the places that intersect all of those points would be this point right here, this point right here, this one right here, and this one right here. So our solution would lie somewhere in this region. And then we have to remember that you can't have negative vehicles carrying people. So it has to be one of these three possible combinations, either 4 cars and 4 minivans, either 6 cars and 6 minivans, or 9 cars and 4 minivans. Let's go back and see what the question had asked us to do after this. Right. People. And so if you wanted to carry exactly 60 people, would have been these two points. Let me check and let me tell you, right? So, right. Now, the question asks us to determine the two combinations for the minimum number of cars and minivans that can carry exactly 60 people on the tour. And so that would be these 2 points right here, the 6-6 and the 9-4. Any questions? Are we good? I take it that everyone is okay with the explanation? No additional questions? Right. I think that was the end question. Oh no, there was one more. It says the company charges $75 to rent a car and $90 to rent a minivan. Show that the minimum rental cost for this tour is $99. So at this point, it'd be similar to what we did before. And so you'd be multiplying the number of vehicles by the cost, and then you'd look for whichever one is the lowest total, whichever combination gives you the lowest total cost. So it's $75 to rent a car and $90 to rent a minivan. Let us calculate that, right? So the 2 points that we got were 6.6 and 9.4, I believe. Let's double check that. Yeah, 6.6 and 9.4. $75. $75 a car and $90 for minivan. And remember, our inequality from before we simplified it, was 4x plus 6y. Oh, sorry, not that. Ignore that. Wouldn't need that one. It's going to be $75 times 6 cars plus $90 multiplied by 6 minibuses, and that gives us $990. The other situation is $75 for 9 cars plus $90 for 4 buses. 75 multiplied by 9 plus 90 multiplied by 4 gives us $1,035. And so the cheapest alternative is where there are 6 cars, 6 minibuses or minivans. Are you okay with that explanation? Right. Shereka, still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. I just wondering if somehow I got disconnected and didn't realize.
No, man, I'm hearing loud and clear. I guess they don't have any concerns, so hence the reason why everyone's quiet. So, guys, let us know if there's another question that you'd like us to work out, or any other topic that you have that you want us to touch on, or were any other topics explained just now unclear and you want us just to run through real quick. Let us know. If not, then we'll end the session here. So I'll give you guys 5 minutes to think about it if you need more time. Functions. So somebody suggested functions, Omari. You can see if you can find a functions question.
Also, can we do some trigonometry?
Trigonometry, all right. All right, so functions. So functions are they can be complicated, but they're pretty straightforward in most cases. The complexity comes about when you don't pay attention to your signs or you don't understand how to find certain things. So again, there's a formula sheet, but not everything is listed on that formula sheet, guys. So please ensure you know and understand the concepts before going into these exams. So question 4, I think this is what, the 2023 paper, right, Omari?
Yeah, that's correct.
All
2023.
right, so question 4 on the 2023 paper is a function question, and we're going to see if we can go through it. So consider the following functions. F of x is equal to 3 over x plus 2, g of x is equal to 4x minus 5, and h of x is equal to x squared plus 1. So for what value of x is the function f of x undefined? So the first question you need to ask yourself is, what does it mean when a function is undefined? Anybody would like to attempt?
Equals to 0.
Yes, so the denominator is usually equal to 0, or, the function itself is equal to 0. So we need to find the value of x that satisfies that concept. So if we're going to find when f of x is equal to 0, let me get my pen. So 0 should be equal to whatever is the function is on the right. So 3 over x plus 2. X plus 2. Then, cross multiply basically. So 3 is equal to 0 times whatever this is. Just for writing purposes, I'm going to write it out so everyone sees how this is not writing so well. Let me try again. So 0 equal then x. Oh my word. Write an x, please. Plus 2. So it's a function. Oh, I'm making an error here, guys. Sorry. It's a fraction, sorry. So undefined in this case would mean that the denominator, I'm not sure if that's what I said, ours. So the denominator is 0. So 3, putting 0 the wrong place, f of x. So we need a value for x to make the denominator 0. And that would be -2. Everyone seen how we arrived at -2? So going over that, the denominator has to be 0 for the function to be considered undefined. You need to find a value for x where when you add 2 to it, it equals 0, and that value is -2. Sorry about the miscommunication earlier. So the answer is -2. So find the value of the function g 1/4 or g of a quarter. So you're basically just going to plug a quarter anywhere in the function where you see x. So it's 4 times a quarter. 4 times a quarter, that should give you 1. And then minus, because there's a second part to it, minus 5. So we agree that 4 here will cancel this 4. So it would be 1 minus 5. That gives you negative 4. You'll do the same for h. So h is x squared plus 1, or x value in this case is negative 3. So negative 3 squared would give us a positive 9 plus 1. That will give us 10. So the tricky part now is where they tell you FF0. So basically what they're asking you to do is plug whatever F is back into F, and then once you collect that function, you'll insert 0 for the X value. So Omari, if you're able to, can you switch to the whiteboard? Let me erase this real quick. Let me erase this. And the whiteboard. So let me see. The question F was 3 over, let me know if you're seeing, because I'm on the whiteboard now, so I can't see if you guys are seeing what I'm writing. So it's X.
Yeah, we're seeing the 3. So go ahead.
So it's X plus 2. This needs to be a little bit brighter. Just trying to change the thickness of the pencil because it's pretty dull. All right, so 3 over X plus 2. And this is f of x. So we're going to basically, where we have x here, we're going to put back this function. So our new equation will look something like this. Over 3 x plus 2.
You know doing this thing?
Plus 2. And then what we'll need to do, we'll need to work out the denominator and then try to simplify this fraction. So usually once there is a unknown value in the denominator, I usually just tell persons, don't try to think of any extravagant number that both the denominators can go into. Just multiply them. So x, in our case, it would be x plus 2 this is supposed to be a 2. The denominator for this whole number here is 1. So it's x plus 2, and that would be times 1. We'll ask ourselves, how many times can this go into this? It will be 1 time. 1 times 3, still 3. Plus, how many times can 1 go into this here? It will be 2. Well, x plus 2, so x plus 2 times the 2 that is already at the top. X plus 2. Then you can simplify this section here. And remember, guys, don't just disregard the 3 that is at the top. We're just trying to work out the denominator Just trying to work out the denominator and then we'll put back the function together. So 3 over all of that we'll have, or under all of that we'll have 3 plus 2 2x plus, and everyone should be able to identify how we arrived at 2x because we're basically expanding this second bracket here. So 2 times x is 2x, 2 times 2, we have 4. And then our denominator remains the same because we're multiplying by 1, so it's still x plus 2. Scroll down a bit. So it's still x plus 2. You can simplify here even further to say it's 7. So it's 7. 7 plus 2x. Let me just tidy this up. Let me put it in another line. So 7 plus 2x all over x plus 2. And remember, guys, it's a fraction, so this is basically saying 3 will be divided by all of this. And we're going to break it down even further. So our 3 divided by this new function that we found, I'm going to refer to it as x just for writing purposes, or xi. So you know when you're dividing, you basically keep the first number, change the sign, and flip the second fraction. So it's still 3. Still 3 times, we're going to flip the second fraction, which would be x plus 2 at the top. And then you'll have the 7 plus 2 at the bottom. And it's pretty easy to expand this. Your final answer should be 3x plus 6 over 7. It should be 2x, my bad. 7 plus 2x. And that would be your function f of x. So we still haven't answered the question because the question asks us f of 0. So we now need to plug 0 into this function anywhere x is to get our final answer. So 3 times 0, that's 0 plus 6. We end up with 6 as our numerator. And 2 times 0 is 0. And then we have 7. So our final answer is 6 over 7. All right, everybody understands that? Going back to the Zoom meeting now. The writing is pretty bad, but I hope you guys understood. Not the last part. Which section in the last part? Where did I lose you? Alyssa. You can use your microphone, Alyssa, if it's taking a while to type. 6 over 7. All right, let me do the entire working out. I'm just going to annotate from Zoom, so it will be a right over. All right, so we have No, you can go back to the whiteboard, Omar, from your screen. So we have 3x, right? We have 3x plus 6. I'm hoping you got up to this point. Over 7 plus 2x. If you can go back to the question, Omar, just to have them know that it's saying f of 0. So now we need to plug anywhere we have x, we need to plug in 0. So in this case, we have 3x, so that would be 3 times 0. So this will become a 0. Any number times 0 is 0. So 0 plus 6, that gives us back the 6 at the top. And again, down here, it's 0 that we're using for the x. So it's 2 times 0, that gives us 0. 7 plus 0, that's still 7. Is that any clearer, Alyssa? All right, great. Anybody else has any questions about that question? I'm hoping everyone's good. So you can go back to the question, Omari. All right, so write an expression in the simplest form for GH of x. So it's pretty much the same concept where you would plug in whatever h of x is. This is 2023. Tamasha, 2023. So you would basically plug whatever h of x is into what g of x is. So where the x value is, that's where you'll put the other function. And let me see if I can just briefly just give you a mock-up idea. Seconds. Trying to find it on my end. All right, so g of x is 4x minus 5. G 4x minus 5. And then h of x is x squared plus 1. I'm just being very short-handed here by just writing the letter. But you should ensure that you write it out, guys. H equal to x squared plus 1. In the meantime, you guys can let me know, how do you find the inverse of a function? How do you find the inverse of a function? So we'll insert the x squared plus 1, where we have x, so it's 4 times x squared plus 1 And then you put back your -5 because you can't leave off that section. And it would be 4x squared plus 4 plus 4 minus 5. Simplify the end of this section that says plus 4 minus 5. That should give you 4x squared minus 1. And that will be your function for GH of x. How did we get the middle 4? So remember, you're expanding this bracket here, right? So we're taking all of this, and that's our x. So you have to put everything in the bracket. Now you need to expand that bracket. So you need to multiply each value within the bracket by whatever is outside. So it's 4 times x squared, that gives us 4x squared. 4 times positive 1, that gives us plus 4. 4 ones 4, and then we add back whatever the -5 is, or whatever the value on the outside was, which is -5 in our case. And then again, we simplify the outside because they're both whole numbers. There is no unknown beside either. So positive 4 minus 5, that gives us -1, or 4 minus 5, -1. And we write back the initial first value, which is 4x squared. So that's your answer. Anybody came up with how do we find the inverse of a function? All right, so basically it's pretty simple. I won't be writing it out, but I'll walk you guys through the steps. So it's basically switching. It's a pretty simple equation, so I'll go through it since g of x is not complex. So we have g of x up here, which is 4x minus 5. You basically just switch your x value with whatever the function is. So minus 5. So we usually convert or just temporarily change the g of x to y. So we just say, all right, we're just switching out to say g of x, we're going to name your y for 2 minutes. So y is equal to 4x minus 5. What we're going to do now is switch the places of the x value with the y value. So it will now become where x is equal to 4y minus 5. And all you'll have to do now is basically transpose this new formula that you came up with to make y the subject. So we're going to make y the subject now. So first thing we need to do is get rid of the whole number, any loose number that's hanging around that's not attached to the y. And in this case, it's our -5. So in order to carry over the -5, we'll have to add it to both sides. So we're adding 5 to both sides. So this is plus 5. Over here, it's going to be plus 5 as well. So we'll end up with something like x plus 5 as this would have cancelled. We're going to have just 4y on the right side. Now we need to get rid of whatever is attached to the y. In our case, it's a 4. So it's being multiplied, so we need to do the opposite. Opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide by 4. So we're dividing by 4. And remember, once you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other side. So this will cancel, or y is going to be equal to x plus 5 over 4. So yes, Borrell, you were correct. X plus 5 over 4. And if you want to, you can just change back from saying y, and you can put g inverse of x. So that's the first step in answering this question. Now, as you guys would have seen, it's not that they just ask you for the function, they would have also asked you to input -2 for the x value. So we're just going to plug -2 into the function. So -2, I'm going to erase some of these things on the screen so you can see the working out for that part. Again, guys, Omar would have explained this, that the points assigned or the marks assigned usually gives you an idea of how much work you need to do. So take note of that. So we have x, in this case is -2, so -2 plus or 5 divided by 4. That should give us our answer. So it's -2 plus 5, that is 3 over 4. And that's our final answer. That's your final answer, 3 over 4 or a quarter. So yeah, that's, I'm not sure if that's the last part of that question. There is more. So that's the last part of that question. Any questions about that question, guys? No, maybe so. As I said, understanding the principles associated with each topic is basically how you will tackle each question. It can't be where you don't know anything and you expect to pass the exam. You have to at least know the basic concepts, if there are any principles associated with it, the formulas, maybe if there are any formulas and things like that. For the first section, you can always wing it because it's most of those questions are usually addition, subtraction, you know. But as you move further down the paper, you're going to have to apply yourselves. All right, so I'm not sure if anything was sent because I was answering that question. So yeah, I think those are the topics you guys had an issue with. What you guys can do, I'm not sure if maybe Omari is available, but what we'll try to do, send the questions in the WhatsApp group if you're a part of the WhatsApp group, and we'll try to answer those questions. So we try to do the working out, send you guys a picture, and you guys can look through and try to understand what's happening. You can agree with me if you're open to that, Omar, so they can forward their questions up to leading up to the exams.
Sure, that's okay with me.
All right. Yes, guys, the recording will be available on YouTube later. So it should be posted sometime today. I'm hoping that's when Janan will post it, but yes, it will be available. New Jamaica Foundation is the name of the YouTube channel. All right, let me try to see if I can send the WhatsApp group link here. Let me stop recording.